Revolution 96.2, this is Dave Sweetmore, and it is an absolute honour to say on the phone now, joining me is not just one of my heroes, but one of the most important, influential and iconic rock stars the world has ever produced. Status Quo's Francis Rossi. How are you, mate?
I'm good, actually. After a build-up like that, I can go now, can't I? I mean, I sound marvellous.
No, you're not going anywhere yet. You're not going anywhere.
Yeah, I'm good, sir. You're good?
Yeah, brilliant. Cheers for taking the time out to join us today. I know you're a busy man. You started your We Talk Too Much tour last week. How's that going?
Going a lot better than I thought. I'm not very good with change, I suppose, as it's apparent being in Status Quo, but it's really good. It's kind of less stressful than doing live shows, and it's really quite surprised at how well it's received. And some of it, people are worried about it being too formatted, which I try not to do. But there are certain stages which are going to be the same each time. There's talk about Rick, and there's an early part. But then what happens is in between it just sort of... We were trying to keep it completely chronological, but it misses sections. So quite often we just go back. We might be suddenly back in the early 60s or stories from the 70s. And it's really interesting because the audience get involved rather a lot. So I'm extremely pleased with it so far.
How does it work then? Is it a case of you telling stories to start with, or is it just question and answers from the go? How's it working?
Well, no, Mick Wall's there with us, and he does the intro, and I sit down, and then the first couple of days, he was saying things that sort of stopped me going, really, or was tripping me up somewhat. So now it's kind of, he asked me the early section, and I kind of explain about it being... we wanted it to be chronological and how it can jump about now, and it has to start with something. So I start with where I was born, and that leads into a little musical interlude, and I put some things in to explain perhaps how Quo ended up, or I ended up doing what I do. So it gets, from then on, it just sort of could go anywhere really, and the second half is more about the Q&As. That gets interesting because it gets funny when the audience hear a question from somebody else in the audience. They find it quite funny. So it's most enjoyable. I didn't think it would be, but it is. It
started last week in Whitley Bay. Have you had many surprise questions, or is it pretty much what you can expect?
One lady said, "Are you still swimming?" I thought, "No, I'm sitting in a chair." But it was question. It was interesting because she obviously knows I try to look after myself, and people are fascinated that a man that's approaching 1/69 still exercises, swims, and has a trainer and stuff like that. Or sometimes it's quite a common question is, what's your favourite gig? And it was like one of the questions, the late ones last night, and I always find that favourite one gig out of that many gigs, there couldn't be one. And I find it odd that we have that in radio and TV. What's your favourite film? One? So to have one favourite, I find is very, very tricky. But I'm trying to think the oddest of questions. One lady asked me how, and she was probably nearly as old as me, and she said, "How did you give up the drugs?" So that's interesting because everyone goes deadly silent, and I often go into the fact that how I got into cocaine, which was how alcohol led me there, and so on, and the whole thing, how our society has a thing about that word, drugs. But you put chemicals, and they're drugs, and they're in all of our food and all of our drinks. But I get a bit sometimes, and then I just best move on. Then I see they're falling asleep. They get charged. If they fall asleep, they get charged another 20.
Is that how it works?
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. I'm coming to the Preston one, and to be honest with you, the story of Francis Rossi and Quo is obviously, you couldn't fit it into a week, never mind a couple of hours.
No, that's... One lady said last night, I wish you'd gone a couple of hours longer, which I could, but there is a limit, I think, in, I'm dealing with, about 600 people a night, perhaps, that you think, you can see them going, no, I've had enough now, or there's a limit, I think.
Well, you've got this tour. It started last week in Whitley Bay. It finishes on the 20th of May in Kings Lynn. You're not actually coming to Manchester, but you're at the Guildhall in Preston on April the 7th. It coincides with a solo album you've done with Hannah Ricard, also called We Talk Too Much. Is that something you've wanted to do for a while? Because it's very country and, I've listened to it.
It's country-ish, the idea of that. I don't know. And again, that's one of the questions that comes, like, how do you do and why did you get and why does this happen? Quite often, like I suppose most of our lives, something, I figure I'm going to go and do this, and I end up doing that. And I think I'm going to do that, and I end up doing this. And I quite like that. Initially, I was just putting some sort of solo album together, just because the older I get, the more and more I enjoy the process of recording and writing and all that. And Hannah was on the acoustic tour with us, and we got talking, and cut a long story short, she came here, stayed for a while, we wrote some stuff, recorded some stuff, people heard it, a deal came up, and suddenly the album's out. And another question is whether we'll tour it, and it's good to explain to people that if it doesn't do very, very well, there'll be nobody to come and see it, and promoters wouldn't take it. So it's all a sort of a chicken and egg situation. What comes with the album's really successful. People that hear it really like it. But as with everything these days, it's getting them to hear it. I'm sure most people out there, if they hear that the bloke in Crow, the old fella, he's got an album out. Yeah, so what? Westwood Girl is a great singer. Who gives a Who cares? So it's getting people to hear it, and that's very much with so much media out there where we do have outlets where people can hear it, which is kind of great, but it also shoots everybody in the foot. In my day, when I was a young fella, there were 2 or 3 TV stations and maybe a few radio stations, and most people listened. So if you got on Radio 1 or Radio 2, you were pretty much sure that everybody heard the record, whereas now you just don't know where they are, and it's so fast-moving that it just turns around and...
Well, I'll be honest, I love it. It's different to the Quo stuff, but it's sort of like, I feel like it's an insight to Francis Rossi. But one thing I want to pick up on is a couple of the tracks on it you've wrote with Bob Young. Now, Bob's been your writing partner for, 50, 60 years. Do you still get a lot of inspiration off each other? Do you still bounce off each other when you're writing?
The initial thing is still there. There are times when... I get sequences, I work them all the time. There are times we decide we're sitting down to do a writing session. He may have an idea, a lyrical idea. Generally, if we're going for bluesy-ish, kind of bluesy, it's not blues, but the way Crow do blues, I'll have a sequence and I say to him, go on. And he sort of goes, and then we go, good, let's go from there. And we start working on it. Generally, if it's country, he has ideas of... these heartfelt, I shouldn't have done that to you, baby routine, which gives us a theme to go with. But it's very much I tend to get the melody or the sequence of a song first, and then we get together. But it varies. That's what I mean. There's no strict one way about it. It varies.
So you've got this, like I say, it's a solid 2-month tour of We Talk Too Much, your spoken word tour, promoting the album as well. That takes you up to the 20th of May, and then you've got a couple of weeks off, and then you've got pretty much 4 months solid of touring festivals with Status Quo. Do you prepare any different now to how you did years ago for these big gigs with Quo?
Much more than we did years ago. I think that's one of the things, again, one of the questions that people say, you regret anything. I regret not... being more studious at score and not being more keen on my instrument. We became successful. So therefore, there's that bravado of youth that says, I don't need to. And it was insecurity and stuff. So I would like to learn more. I think when we were at Butlins, we could have worked more. And again, when we went back to tour, we never played between tours. We just didn't do anything. Just put the instrument down. And Rick did that until he died. That was the way we grew up. I suddenly need to, particularly now, I play and I've been playing, well, I haven't stopped, I don't stop. I try and do more 1.5, 2 hours a day, and I try and incorporate acoustic guitar, what we were doing out here, and I'm basically preparing for maybe there's 2 or 3 new numbers that may go into the set when we go out, and playing the stuff in the set to keep your hands going, because to make Quo work, it really needs to be quite slick and energetic. If you can't physically put that into it, the physicality, which I learned from Little Richard or Jerry Lee Lewis, it's kind of, it's all right. And when we were at rehearsals, it's like, yeah, we think initially it's hard, and then that gets okay. And then when we go out, you realise, we go out, and I think it's the 3rd of June in Berlin. And I know we're going to walk, we'll do sound check, it'll be fine, and we'll walk onto that gig, and it's like, I forgot, it's quite like this, the extra, whatever it does, and that's why I've always been quite fit, I think, it's doing that gig.
I watched an interview with you the other week, actually, and I mean, like I say, I've been a fan for years and years. I've seen you loads of times, and one of the things that really stood out was the fact you were saying like your routine now is kind of like every single night you still practice and you still rehearse your guitar all these years on, which is amazing.
Well, I think it's good. I want to be. This sounds a bit. I want to be as good as I can be. I was saying to this audience last night, we all of us this side want them to love us, want them to be there. So to go out there and not be, I would get really upset and not be the best I can be, whatever that is. And if that's good enough, I don't really know. So I'm always trying to make it better. Whether it's I was telling somebody asked us what I eat. When I'm out there at the moment, it's chicken, steamed vegetables, and a cheese and tomato roll when I'm finished. Anything in between, there's nothing so that you feel lean. The stomach feels empty. I feel fit and focused. It's a pain in the derriere sometimes, but I like the routine of it.
Well, you're looking and sounding as good, better than ever. And one thing I want to pick up on is, obviously, it's a couple of years since we lost Rick, who'll never, ever be forgot. Last time I saw you lads was at Kendall Rocks last year. I was at that gig.
Oh, yeah.
It was quite a bit of a balmy gig for you, really, wasn't it? It was, it was a great gig.
To be honest, the young uns and John Edwards had a bit of a night the night before. And this is one of the things, I don't mind people doing what they do, but we must be fit and in the right shape for that gig, any gig. So if you're up and say, I'm a bit hungover, that's disgraceful. And I was annoyed with them for being that way. So for me that night we were a little under par, but I did get some chips from the store behind there when we left, and I had a chip sandwich, which made up for it.
Well, the one thing was that was the first time I'd seen you since Richie Malone's been in the band. Now I'd seen a load of video clips, and I can't believe as a fan how well Richie Malone has fitted into the Quo. He's sort of like he's been there forever.
Yeah, he really has. He started obviously trying to replace Rick. That must have been difficult. And it helped him a lot that Rick sent him a thing saying, it can only be you, Richie. And he meant that because I don't think Rick would have liked us to try and replace him with an archetypal blonde, maybe a name of some sort. The fact that it was Richie and we knew Richie. And something Richie brought to us made the rest of us, and the fact that we lost Rick made us all go, we better let's focus or something. So I find the arrangements and the dynamics within the songs have gone back to their very early state of how they were recorded.
Do you feel there's a new energy in the band with Richie?
Yes, there is. There's something going on, which I'm so grateful for, because it could really have just gone a bit sour and I'd have been pissed off and probably said, I can't do this.
Well, like I say, I looked at it as almost, it was sort of like he sort of made it his own but continued what Rick did, and that's a talent, that, isn't it? It's a gift.
It's very hard to put that into words, but people would have to see it and see what they think. I'm sure some people still won't, but some people definitely have, like yourself, have come to us and say, well, we didn't think it would, and it isn't Rick, which it isn't, but something still good is going on, and Richie's made it his own. Which you can see us looking at each other on stage. There's an energy and an expectancy of what's going to happen. We're looking at each other. So, plus I think it feels again like you're kind of fighting against something that. But some people say you wouldn't be able to do it, so that's good. You shouldn't have done that to me. It makes me fight harder.
Well, look, Rick will obviously never be forgot, but like I say, it looked like you were enjoying yourselves as well, which is obviously the main thing.
I think it's a relief that we can, and there is something there. I mean, a lot of people said to Rick and I when the others left, or when we split with the others, that we would be no good without them. And that made Rick and I dig in. It makes you, and the same, some people have said that to us or to me. And all they did, I thanked them, because it makes me think, I'm going to try then. Whereas I may not have tried so hard if they hadn't have said, go away, Rossi.
Well, I know at the moment, obviously, you're concentrating on the We Talk Too Much stuff, but the one thing everybody is going to be wondering, once you've got all these festivals and stuff out of the way, is there plans of a Status Quo tour? Is there plans of a Status Quo album? Can we see anything new in the future?
We're looking and toying with the idea of an album. I don't think there'll be an end of the year tour here this year, but it does mean that possibly could happen next year. It depends. And it depends how good we are when we get out this time. We haven't been off this long, I can't think, since I can't remember when. And so it depends how we are when we get back out. If we're enjoying it and we're getting good response from people, which we were last year. If that's still there, then there are possibilities of perhaps going out and doing another arena tour next year. And we are writing and trying ideas for an album, but don't know. But close.
Well, let's hope so. Francis Rossi, the We Talk Too Much spoken tour is taking place at the moment. It goes until the 20th of May in Kings Lynn. They're not in Manchester. Sorry, he's not in Manchester, but he is at Preston Guildhall on April the 7th, which is exactly where I'll be. The album's sounding absolutely amazing. Francis, enjoy the rest of the tour. Good luck with the album. It has been an absolute pleasure and privilege speaking to you, man.
Thank you very much, sir. Take care now.
Thanks, Francis. Bye.